Hey everyone, once again, Two Noobs Talking coming at you, episode number 9 with John Tracy. I'm Matt Craig. John, how you doing, man?
Going on, Matt?
Oh, doing good. We have with us a very special guest, my father, Major General Wesley E. Craig, U.S. Army retired. Dad was the 34th Commanding General of the 28th Infantry Division. He also served as the 51st Adjutant General of the state of Pennsylvania. Dad, it's such an honor for you to join us here, and welcome to Two Noobs Talking. How are you?
I'm doing fine, Matt. It's good to see both you and John. Looking forward to our conversation.
It's great. Yeah, likewise as well. So let's just dive right in. Really, at the start, I mentioned obviously at the top that you served as the Adjutant General of the state of Pennsylvania. Can you briefly tell us like what an Adjutant General is, and basically what have you been doing since you retired back? I think it was in 2015 you had retired. So what have you been doing
That's right.
since?
Well, the Adjutant General, there's one in every state, and their primary job is to command the Army and the Air Guard that belongs to that state. In the state of Pennsylvania, and you're a government cabinet official. So I was on the Governor Corbett's cabinet, just like any other cabinet official there. And I had 19,000 soldiers and airmen under me. And in our state also, they tie in Veterans Affairs. So I ran what was called the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs. I had 6 retirement homes across the state that I supervised as well for veterans, and we had about 1,400 residents. They all 6 ones offer all 3 levels of care. Just domiciliary care, and then skilled nursing and memory enhancement care as well. All 3 levels of care. And just have to get in there, you just have to be a veteran. And it's based on your ability to pay. So I had to supervise all that. Any programs that the legislature passed, outreach programs, support programs for veterans, and then of course run the Pennsylvania National Guard. So what I've been doing since retirement, figured I was too young to sit on my hands. And so the military for me was a watershed moment. I served for 42 years total. Retired from it twice, once after I left Division Command, with 4 years retired, and then came back to become the Adjutant General. And now I've been retired for almost 5 years. But I do a lot of volunteer work, and it's primarily emphasizing veteran support or support of those in the Guard and Reserve. I served on the board of directors of the USO for more than 10 years. And I was the project officer of the USO where we built the new USO Center down at the Philly airport. I was the one in charge of that. Twice I was the acting president. So I was full-time, 5 days a week employment, running the center in Philadelphia, plus several other satellite centers. And I guess I did 4 months till we lost one president, till we hired the next one. He only lasted for about 6 months and bailed out. And then I was asked to come back in again. I did that for 6 months. And then we picked out the president who served for about 8 years. So I worked with them. I also then became the chairman of the board of the USO for 3 years and ran the whole organization. I also became the state chairman for employer support of the Guard and Reserve, ESGR as we call them. And our job is to build that bridge between the service member of the Guard and Reserve service member and their employer. So the employer understands the law, the soldier understands the law. We give awards to the employers that go above and beyond. And we have a group of mediators called ombudsmen when there is a problem, so they can talk it out rather than resorting to courts. And then I've done other volunteer work. I'm on the Armed Services Council of the Union League of Philadelphia. I'm the current chairman of that. And then also did another project for my American Legion post. I'm in American Legion Post 10 here in Fort Washington, just down the street. And they had gotten a large bequest of $500,000 where we extensively renovated the American Legion House, which was an 1880s built house with about 4 extensions built onto it, additions built onto it, none of which were to code. So we literally tore down all the roof off it, gutted the bathrooms, threw out the bathrooms, and rebuilt the whole thing. So now we've got a dining area of about 150 for about 150 people. So I did all that. So I'm working primarily as a volunteer for what I can do to help veterans and those in the Guard and Reserve.
That's
Long story short.
Yeah, that's just tremendous.
Absolutely amazing. I'll definitely, we're going to put some of the stuff that you were doing, that you've done with Veteran Affairs. We definitely want to put them in our show notes. So we
Okay.
will coordinate all that. And anybody who is listening, you definitely will be able to look these programs up and find these programs.
Okay,
Absolutely.
good.
Yeah.
Good.
Dan, what were some of the reasons why you joined the Army, and specifically the National Guard?
Okay. Of course, the U.S. has used a draft to support and raise its armies during World War I. Well, during the Civil War, then they did away with it. Then World War I, then they did away with it. And then World War II, really all the way through the 1970s. So they kept the draft up from about 41 through 72. So in 1964, I graduated from high school. The draft was on. Vietnam was starting to come on board and get hot. So the draft continued, and they were drafting literally anybody, unless you had a seeing eye dog that had rheumatism, then they wouldn't take you. Almost that way. So I said, okay, looks like I'm going in the Army. So if I'm going to go in the Army, I'm going to go into the ROTC and become an officer, where even as a second lieutenant, I'm a low-level leader, but at least I'm a leader. I didn't want to be a follower. I wanted to be a leader. I thought I had something I could offer. And so that's what got me in the Army. So served 2 years, never went. I was in Georgia, down at Hunter Army Airfield in Savannah, Georgia. Did personnel administrative work. So I said, okay, that's nice. It came out after 2 years. And I said, well, I'll try the National Guard. I always wanted to be in the armored cavalry business. And there was a Guard unit not far, only about 5 miles away in northwest Philadelphia, right by Central High School. And I was an armored cavalry squadron headquarters. So I joined them just to try it out. And I figured, well, I'll do this, see if I like it, and maybe I can stay till I'm a captain, because I thought captains, they were really smart. You know, I was just a lieutenant, and these guys, captains, knew all the answers. And so I stayed in, became a captain, and then lo and behold, the next thing I knew, I'd been in for over 30 years. It was the 2-star general. So, but that's what got me in. The fact that I didn't want to go in as enlisted. I wanted to become a leader, even though it was a low-level leader, a second lieutenant. And so that's what got me in the military. That's what then got me in the National Guard, because I wanted to get in that branch of service, the Armored Cavalry. And I'm glad I did. I enjoyed that thoroughly.
Oh,
My follow-up question to that is, core values are so important for everybody, especially missions and personal missions and everything. What are some of the core things that you learned that you didn't know before you got in to then when you retired? Like what changed inside you that the military taught you?
Yeah, I learned a lot from the military. First was leadership, how to become a leader, how to look at a problem, identify the real core of the problem, develop or work with a staff to develop alternative ways of solving that problem, and then actually taking the time to pick the best solution. And you do that based on by weighing criteria. You know, what can we accomplish with least cost in terms of material, injuries, or expenditure of fuel, or whatever it is. So you come up with criteria for this. So that meant a lot to me. That probably the best thing I learned in the military, how to be a good leader. Obviously, the problem solving was extremely important. I learned respect for others. I like to say the military made me colorblind. I very quickly learned when I joined, especially the National Guard, because the unit had been back in the 1950s an all-black engineer battalion. They changed it to Armored Cavalry Squadron. So the unit was about 60%, 70% African American. So I was in the minority. I very quickly learned it didn't matter what color. You red, yellow, black, or white. What counted was, could you do your job? And I said, okay, if you can do your job, you're going to help keep me alive. I'm going to do my job so I can keep you alive. You're my friend and fellow soldier. I need you. So I do say that. I do mean that. I mean, very quickly, I grew up in an almost all-white high school. We had, with only a few exceptions, a handful of black people there. And I learned very quickly from the military. So respect for others, diversity, working with diversity. I also learned empathy. I realized that as I grew in rank and responsibility, it was my orders sending people out on the front lines potentially that could lead to their life or death. If I didn't do a good job, if I did not put them in the position where they could succeed, they could give their lives because I wasn't as a good a leader. So that really gave me a lot of focus, also gave me empathy for what it's like to be on the front lines. And then finally, I guess selfless service. I mean, it is a profession. You don't do it because you're making a lot of money, because you don't make a lot of money. But you do it because you're in it for, you're in it a much bigger thing than yourself. And you can see what the corporate group, the large group, the battalion or the division or the regiment can do when there's an emergencies, whether in combat or you're here in the United States. So there's some of the things, core values that really helped me, or were really expanded those core values as I worked in the military.
All that is just unbelievable. Go ahead, Dad. What were you going to say?
And goes back to all my Boy Scout and honesty.
Yeah.
You have to be honest with yourself. You have to be honest with your troops, because if you're lying, they'll find out about it and they'll know you're a phony baloney. So you got to be honest, even if it hurts.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's just, all of those things are just so important. John and I were talking last week about the importance of integrity and having that. And you can see it right now where things are kind of, you're up, if you're up in the air and you're not sure about what kind of a decision you're going to make, you're going to cause so much confusion and fear and anxiety and chaos. Just the opposite of that. If you have that in the military, if you have fear and anxiety, that's not going to win you any kind of a battle,
No.
much less a deployment. So, I mean, that's such a great point.
Yes, it's going to cost people their lives. So you have to be honest. So if you're going to send them in harm's way, they have to know what they're getting into. And hopefully you train them well enough, and then you've developed, and if it's a plan of attack, that you've got enough supporting arms there so they have a chance of getting through it.
Yeah.
And that's your job as a commander.
Absolutely. Dad, I've obviously living with you, having seen the National Guard evolve. Can you just talk about that in and of itself? Because, obviously there were a lot of hand-me-downs in the early part of the National Guard. How is that from the early to mid 70s? How has that organization changed over the years? I'd love to hear your answer on this.
Yeah, that's a very good question, man. It has changed dramatically. When I joined, most of our vehicles, heavy vehicles, were leftovers from the Korean War. So I joined the Guard in 1970. The Korean War was over in the early 50s. So these could be legitimately given antique license plates in the state of Pennsylvania because they were more than 20 years old. So vehicles don't hold up that well. So yes, the equipment, when I first got there, they had just issued the weekend drill before my arrival, the M16 rifle. Before they had M1s, which was World War II weapons. The machine guns were World War II weapons. The radios were World War II. So, we were very much under-equipped. We did 1 weekend of training a month, 2 weeks in the summer, and that was it. Never any more on that. Well, as time went by, and by the late 1980s, there was more money. It's when Reagan was in, and he had done a military buildup. It did trickle down to the Guard. A lot of our old equipment got replaced. So rather than 20-year-old rolling stock, we had 8 and 10-year-old rolling stock, a big improvement. We all had the more advanced weapons of M16s. We had communications gear that would actually work. That was only 10 years old. And again, when you're used to 20 and 30-year-old stuff, this is a big thing. So the equipment got better. And then, of course, Desert Storm came along in the 1990s. We didn't get mobilized much. But there was a realization now, as the active component was beginning to rapidly shrink. The active component army back in just before Desert Storm started was about 800,000. Now it's 485,000, a big decrease. So where does the country go when it needs more manpower? It goes to the Guard. And then when terrorist attacks occurred on September 11th, 2001, we found our prosecuting a war first in Afghanistan. The active component didn't need too much help, although my headquarters, the 28th Division headquarters, was deployed to take care of the peacekeeping mission first in Bosnia. We came home for that, turned around, went right to Kosovo. So we did 2 of those deployments, which were normally run by active duty soldiers. They wanted to get out of that because they were concentrating on the war. And of course, we invaded Iraq. And then overnight, we were in Iraq as well. So now out of the 19,000 28th Division soldiers, they've deployed about 30,000 times in 20 years. So everybody now, so we're an operational unit. We're now fully equipped. We got the same stuff that the active duty Army has. And now we're on a rotation. My former soldiers, they used to be my soldiers, are now on a rotation. Most battalions can expect to be mobilized within every 5 or 6 years. And that's been going on now since 2003. So we're an operational force. very much up to date in equipment. We've got a lot of training and a lot of experience, because before, when I joined, we had a scattering of Vietnam veterans and that was it. Now almost everybody has had at least one overseas deployment, some several. So it's much more modern and up to date.
Yeah,
And then of course, as I guess it really started with the disaster down at Katrina, when the governors found that the only place they could turn to get a lot of troops right away that could do almost anything they asked and didn't cost the governor anything because Uncle Sam was paying for us when we go to these big missions, was the Guards deployment to Katrina. Because then every other major deployment since then, we've been up to our ears in, and I've taken part. I guess I did a total of 9 in my 40 years in the Guard. Big deployments within the state, usually for more than a week at a crack. Where there's a disaster in part of the state, we go in and offer food, comfort, and shelter and emergency evacuation. So yeah, it's grown up a lot, Matt. That's for sure.
Yeah, I was just going to say one of the best photos I can remember was when Pennsylvania had 2 back-to-back devastating hurricanes right through the center of the state. I think it was the first year of your adjutant generalship, and there's a great photo of this active Guard soldier carrying this woman who had pretty much like lost her home, lost her car, whatever, and she was stranded. And it was just a beautiful shot of him just carrying her to safety. And it's just like, you want to talk about selfless service. It's that kind of thing that happens all the time in the Guard. Yeah.
And a little more elaborate on that story, that sergeant was in a boat crew and they got to this girl's house and they took her out of the second floor window because the water line was up to the second floor. She walked down the roof of the porch onto the boat, and then they traveled for about a half mile. So they got where he could pick her up and carry the last couple feet through about 6 inches of water to his dry land. Yeah, that was quite the story. Yes,
amazing.
We did a lot of that.
Yeah,
beautiful story. So let's move on to what been near and dear to my heart. Been doing some research on the VA, how much it's changed over the last couple of years. My first question is kind of, what was it like while you were serving? Because I hear a lot of horror stories. Maybe not horror stories, well, some horror stories, but I hear a lot of it's gotten better, it's gotten better, it's gotten better. So my question is, what did it kind of look like before?
Yeah, when I was serving in, say, throughout the 70s, really to the 90s, the VA primarily was being concentrated on World War II generation, which was aging. So slowly over time, they became experts in geriatric medicine because the great bulk of their patients were guys that fought World War II. So in the 80s, these guys were already in their 60s. In the 90s, they were in their 70s. And now 2000s, they were in their 80s. So they were very much concentrating in geriatric medicine. And then there was another controversy at about the same time with Vietnam veterans, and that's Agent Orange. Agent Orange became known eventually as a carcinogen. It was originally billed as doesn't hurt people, it just kills plants. So, when you see pictures of what it does to plants, you think, I don't know.
Yeah.
So they concentrated on that, and they had to be forced into taking care of Vietnam veterans with Agent Orange diseases. So they didn't have a very good reputation. It was like where the old people went, and that kind of thing. All the younger veterans of service weren't exposed to combat at that point until Desert Storm came along. So now, then along comes Iraq and Afghanistan. Now you get guys, the primary thing is missing limbs. Well, they were way behind the power curve and hadn't really done hardly any of that since right after World War II and right after Korea. And they really didn't do much of that, a little bit after Vietnam, but they were really behind the power curve. So that gave them a really bad reputation with the current generation of Iraq and Afghani veterans. So after a number of scandals, including some of the famous ones out west, where I think it was Arizona, where they were phoning up the waiting time and phoning up records, they looked good. The whistle got blown on them, and I interviewed Secretary Shulkin, who was not the current one, was the one before this, and he really started to shake up the troops. He was empowered by acts of Congress finally to fire people who deserved to be fired, who were causing this scandal out in Arizona, who were phoning up records. So was able to hold a lot of people accountable and got rid of people who were dead wood. That was a big improvement. And then he left, and Secretary Wilkie is now the secretary. I met him as well. He's a veteran himself and a son of a veteran, very much engaged and has been able to continue on that. So now when I talk to Iraqi and Afghani veterans who go to the VA, I would say 90% of them say they have a very good experience. The VA really worked to reinvent themselves, to be much more customer friendly, turn it much more into there's two ways to approach a problem. No, I can't help you, don't bother me. Or, okay, I'll try and find a way to help you. And that's obviously was permeated the VA, and I credit Secretary Wilkie and before him Secretary Shulkin for installing that. It makes all the difference in the world in the VA. They've expanded, they've concentrated and done some remarkable things in conjunction with Walter Reed Army Hospital on rehabilitation of missing limbs, artificial limbs. It's just incredible what they've done. And they've not been strangers also. They worked on this COVID-19 thing. I had a friend of mine who was in the one in Philadelphia for a week with COVID-19. He's in his 50s. He's back out on the street. He's fine now. So it's a big turnaround in the VA. I can agree with you that it definitely has happened.
That's awesome. That's just awesome. I'm glad to get that out to people because everybody needs to know that.
Yeah, it's been a real change in the mindset. Like I say, to no, we can't help you, or no, to okay, let's see how we can actually help you. A great change of mindset.
That's just great news.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess, because I think you had answered that question about like what's been changed and going forward, but Dad, let's change things up a little bit. Big baseball fan. And I know you and I have gone to a lot of Phillies games and have suffered a lot and all that kind of stuff. How did you become a big Phillies fan, for one? I guess we'll start there. And who would you say would be your favorite Philly player ever?
Okay, when I was growing up, I had heard a little bit about the 1950 Whiz Kids and how they won the pennant. It was unexpected. Richie Ashburn did that tremendous. He was a rookie, threw out the guy at home, even though he didn't have a really good arm, but somehow he was able to do it. And so that I heard about. Of course, then they went on and went to the Yankees. The Yankees killed them in the series. So I heard a little bit about that. And so I really started following them in 1964, when that's had the year where they had a great run up until about the last 2 weeks of the season. Gene Mauch tried to overmanage them, and they collapsed, and it was awful.
Awful.
I can remember, I think Pete Rose was playing for the Reds. I think he was a rookie. And they couldn't, and they had several, in the last 2 weeks, they had like 2 series with the Reds. And I don't think they ever got Rose out, ever. He hit him every time he came up, double, single, steal a base. He just murdered him. And so I was pulling my hair out. I said, "Oh, these guys are terrible." And then of course, so then I became hooked, and so I started following. And of course, in the 1980s, they won the series.
Yeah. In
the late 70s, they started getting good, better, and then in 1980s, they came with that good team they had and won the World Series. In a long dry stretch again, and then of course, in the early, well, I guess in 2000s, 6, 7, 8, 9. They had a series of teams that won the World Series, won pennants, won division championships. They had a really good team there for a while.
Oh, for sure.
That 07 to 12 was the most fun I've had in baseball. Great teams they had.
Yeah, and of the more current Phillies, probably Roy Halladay.
Roy Halladay,
Roy Halladay, the pitcher. He was just tremendous.
Yeah.
Going back to some of the other ones, of the Whiz Kids, probably Richie Ashburn and Robin Roberts. I saw them both play when I went to Connie Mack Stadium a couple of times, and they were really, really neat. A lot of other good ones in between, but probably they're the top 3, I think. Like Mike Schmidt.
Yep.
Dick Allen, I remember him. He was really good.
We just lost Dick Allen, of course. Yeah, just this last week, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of good players here.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun with Jay Johnstone was like a substitute player. He's kind of a clown, but he also could do some pretty good things every once in a while. So
Yeah.
But yeah, so there are a lot of good memories.
A lot of good memories there.
Yeah.
You mentioned Connie Mack, and of course, like we went to the Vet years ago, saw them there, and then Citizens Bank Park. Of the three stadiums you've been to, Dad, which one do you think is the best one to watch a ball game?
Well, I'd have to go with Citizens Bank Park. A lot more
Mhm.
amenities. You've got good lines of sight. You're pretty close. Veterans Stadium was kind of fun, but it's one of those weird combination of football, baseball stadiums. So if
Mhm.
you're up in the cheap seats, you're way far away.
Way up there, way far back.
Uh,
Yeah.
Connie Mack was fun because I did it when I guess our first trip was there when I was a Cub Scout, there when I was a Boy Scout, when I was a high school student. But yeah, by today's standards, that wouldn't even be a good minor league park,
Mhm.
because the minor league parks in the Reading Phillies and for the Iron Pigs in Allentown, much superior to Connie Mack Stadium.
Connie
But it
Mack.
had its own cachet, I guess we'll call it. I guess we'll call it cachet. And aroma too. Not always good, but it was kind of fun to go to. But I would say Citizens Bank Park.
Citizens Bank, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, love good baseball talk. Moving on from that talking about the championship teams, let's talk a little bit about leadership overseas, because you went overseas many of times, as you spoke before. Let's kind of just talk about leadership on the ground. Not necessarily, you've already made your plan, you already flew over, you know what I mean? You already deployed, you've got all that. Now, when you're on the ground, what leadership, how do you do that? That's basically the question. I don't have the right language to add. How do you do something like that? Because if you put me in that situation, I mean, we're all in trouble.
Thousands of troops, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
thousands
John,
and thousands of troops being deployed. How the leadership is what we were worried about. How does that happen?
it starts with a strong chain of command. So when I was deploying brigades and I wasn't going with them, but the brigade was going over, I did everything I could. I knew practically all the commanders, the battalion commanders, the brigade commander, and his staff. And so if I knew if I had a weak link there, I would work with the brigade commander who's taking the troops overseas and say, okay, we think this guy or gal isn't going to make it. Who do you want in their place? So we would try to ensure we had the best possible leadership at every level of command. And I charged the brigade commander to do the same at the battalion level, because the battalion commander has companies of about 150 reporting to him, usually about 4 or 5 companies reporting to him. So you try to strengthen the chain of command. Probably my most difficult time with leadership really was when I was at Operation Bright Star in Egypt. And that was a ground maneuver exercise where I had an Egyptian Army brigade, the U.S. Marine Corps 13th MU, Marine Expeditionary Unit. That's a group of about 2,000 U.S. Marines. Very interesting unit because they're all arms. They have some armor. They have a lot of infantry on track vehicles. They have their own small Air Force. They fly a small squadron of jump jets, Harrier jump jets off small carriers, and then and helicopters as well. I had a Army helicopter group from the Army Reserve, and then I had a Belgian, a small reconnaissance squadron for the Belgian Army. I had a Jordanian mechanized infantry company, and I had 2 brigades of Egyptians, armored mechanized forces. And we were attacking another brigade of Egyptians. So of course, Egyptians, you're dealing with language barriers. All the other guys in there were NATO allies. We've done NATO standardization. They understand NATO's standard order briefings. The Egyptians are still learning that. Many of the senior level Egyptians were trained by the Russians, and they approach things a lot different than we do. We exercise low level initiative. The Russians, that's verboten. No, you don't do that. You go by the plan, because the plan is the plan. So what I did, I found I had to issue a very simple and direct, what we call commander's intent. And it's a short paragraph, and it tells anybody who knows anything about the military what I want done and how I'm basically going to do it. So we have one brigade attacking another brigade in the wide open desert. So I usually just run into each other, and it's an attrition warfare. Well, I was told by the 3rd Army, U.S. Army commander, who was my boss, you can't do that. You got to show maneuver. And oh, by the way, this is done in open desert, and there's about 100 general officers there, from various African nations and most of the Egyptian Army General Staff will be sitting in stands watching this.
Oh my
So I'm
God.
putting on a maneuver, but it's got to be canned, but it's got to show low maneuver. So I said, how am I going to do this? So that's what I use the Marines for. So you developed a plan, and the plan was a head-on attack with a flank attack by the U.S. Marines, and I'm taking that Belgian light unit and dropping them on the enemy's command post. So how did I know where the enemy's command post was? Well, the Marines just happened to have access to national level satellites. So they had a way to communicate with the national spy satellite went overhead. I had the best layout for any attacking officer could ever have. I knew literally where every Egyptian tank was that was opposing me.
Wow.
So you basically, I was issued as simple as I could possibly. The Egyptians knew, the Egyptian brigade worked for me, had to attack head on. The Marines knew they were going to come around and attack from the flank by coming around the stands. And the Belgians knew they were going to drop in and destroy the command post, being infiltrated by Army helicopter. So we did all that, sling loading these really neat dune buggies that the Belgians had. So they drove over and absolutely blew up and destroyed the Egyptian command post, the defending brigade, and everything hit them at once, just rolled right over them.
Wow.
So everybody knew that. And the other thing I had to do, so you have a relatively simple plan where everybody knows the intent. So if they forget all the detailed orders, if you're Egyptian, you know I got to attack head on. The Marines, I got to know I got to attack them on the flank. The Belgians, I got to drop in and take out the command post. As simple as that. Then I found, since I was working with Egyptians and working with a very different language, I had to put liaison officers in each Egyptian down to battalion headquarters. So they're at the brigade headquarters and at the 3 attacking battalion headquarters as well. So I call them up and say, where are you? What are you doing? And why aren't you here? That kind of thing. So a simple plan with a good way to follow up is the way I did that. So that was, and that can be extrapolated to really anything, you know, whether it's a tactical warfare or Operation Warp Speed here with this COVID-19 response. Warp Speed has a way they think they can track all these, the distribution of all that stuff. That way you know that it's getting done. So you got to tell them what you want to do. You have to have a way to check out to see that it is done.
It's amazing.
Long story short, after a better answer. That's what I was trying to fumble out. Thank you. Literally what I wanted.
So it's really like, and I think that's the key, Dad, is like what you just mentioned about like delegating responsibilities. You have language barriers. You have things where if things don't go well, it breaks that entire plan apart, basically, right? I mean, at the end of the day.
Yes.
And so that when you have like the liaison that's working with the Egyptians that don't know much English, this is what the plan is. Here's what you need to do in order to accomplish the goal. Makes the results speak for themselves. You're able to roll right over your enemy and you end up winning.
And with us having experience with the NATO allies of Belgium and of course the Marines, because they're U.S., they understand how we think and talk. And so during this attack, the Marines were lagging behind, so they would get a horn and say, "Hey, get moving! I need you at point A by the next 15 minutes." They responded and understood. The Egyptians, you got a language difficulty. They're not used to flexible orders, and so then I realized also that my liaison officer is usually a major, talking to a full Egyptian colonel, and there's not only a difference of language, there's a difference in rank. And here's this major telling this full colonel to get a move on because the general's yelling at me. And okay, now you have to deal with some feelings, because the Egyptian colonel in his brigade is the king.
Yeah.
And now here's I'm yelling through my major to get him moving. So you have to realize that as well. So I issued, the other thing we did, which I didn't mention, we issued the order. I try to keep it as simple as possible. And we did what we called a map rehearsal. So we laid out, we covered probably 50 yards by about 20 yards. And it was and we laid out put phony tanks around, little model tanks and unit designations. And we walked everybody through what we wanted to do. Wow. And of course I was speaking through an interpreter. Yep. So I would say a sentence, he would say a sentence, which makes it, helps a lot to keep it very simple. Yeah. Rather than getting long-winded like I am now. But that helped too. So
that's also what I wanted.
Simple plan, rehearse it, which actually they did for this COVID-19 at Warp Speed thing, and then execute it with a way to check up on the execution. That's probably the best way to get things done.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's elements of Lean Six Sigma in that too, Dad.
Oh, yeah.
It's like you just have to follow it all the way through the end. Really. Yeah. So tell us, what was probably your best 3 moments serving in the National Guard? Looking back all those 40 some odd years that you've served, what are the top 3 like most memorable that you can recall, like right off the top of your head?
Well, the first is sort of a personal thing, and I won't count them on the top 3, but I have to say this. My first year in the Guard, we were late coming home, and of course I wasn't married at that time. I was dating your mother,
Yep.
my dad was too old to come get me. So when we finally got in, it was like about 9, 10 o'clock at night. So I called your mom. She came in down and picked me up. And that was the best moment because she looked like $1 million. I'll tell you. when she came in, when she come pick me up, because for a whole bunch of reasons, I was really happy to see her.
Yeah.
And then only a couple of months later, I proposed to her, and within a year,
The rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that doesn't count for an official Guard thing, but that was a good, memorable point.
Yeah.
Probably in the Cav Squadron, when I took command of the Cavalry Squadron, that's a group of about 500-600 troops.
Yeah.
We got 2 ground troops armed with tanks and personnel carriers, 2 air cavalry troops armed with attack helicopters and scout helicopters. A lot of fun to manage and maneuver around.
Mm.
The unit, when I took it over, had a really bad reputation, probably somewhat undeservedly so. And so I worked really hard. I knew that I came from that unit. I knew there were some really good people there. I worked to get the best leaders in position. And then we were told after I'd been there a year, that within the following year, we'd be tested at the entire unit level. The whole squadron would be tested how well we could do what we're supposed to do in a battlefield against an opposing force. So we worked hard getting used to it. And then at the end of this, we did, I think, quite well. When the senior evaluator came in and he was debriefing myself and my troop commanders in front of the 28th Division's assistant division commander. So they were there to listen too. The first words out of his mouth, I said, were, this unit was much better than expected. We had seen them 2 years prior, and they had a lot to work on. So they were much better than expected. You guys have really come a long way. So that to me was very personally rewarding.
Huge.
That's number 1. At brigade level, when I took over the 56th Brigade, or really just before I did, literally a week before, Philly was hit with this huge snowstorm of 36 inches. Stopped the city cold. Nothing moved for a week. Matt, you remember this?
I sure do.
Out the driveway without me. And nothing moved except the heavy Army trucks, because they're all 4-wheel drive or 6 or 8-wheel drive.
Yeah.
And they got a lot of road clearance, and our Humvees. So we had sent 2 Humvees to every police station so they could move around and do what they had to do policing, because none of their cars would work. They all get stuck in the snow.
Yeah.
Delivered food. We did the same thing, moving people in and out of hospitals, patients, those who are on kidney dialysis patient, people who were in cardiac arrest. The ambulance couldn't get them. We had to get them and bring them to the hospital. We had to remove 2 dead people who died of cardiac arrest in their home. And then we did a group. We have 4 heavy wreckers in the city, and they could pull anything. And so out of anything. So they were roaming the city with the city streets department and pulling out maroon police cars, ambulances, fire trucks, you name it, they were all over the place.
Wow.
So that was another highlight. Several months later, the city brought us together and gave us a whole series of awards. And we got in front of a group of kidney dialysis doctors, and they gave us a nice plaque, credited us with saving probably about 100 lives, because you're in kidney dialysis and you don't get it, you're going to die really soon.
Yeah.
So that was number 2. And number 3, when I was a division commander, well, I guess 2 there, but really the one I pick out the most, we had a command post exercise called a Warfighter. Matt, you know all about these, where we're shipped out to Fort Leavenworth, just the command post. So the division command post, about 400 people, each brigade command post of 150 come with us. And then they have players that go on computers. And we did a war game on a computer, which is extremely demanding. It's 24/7 for about 5 days straight. And when you're in the middle of that, you feel like you can literally hear the tanks and the bullets flying. It's that intense. And we went through there when I was division commander, and we absolutely crushed the opposing force. The first time that had happened, the opposing force commander does this for the whole series of rotational brigade forces from the active Army and the Guard forces as well. And he had done 30 of these rotations over a 3-year term. And this is the first time he was thoroughly crushed and defeated. We got to the objective on during computers. So it means we got inside his decision loop, moved faster than he could think, took advantage of our cross-country mobility because my units were armed with Bradleys and Abrams tanks, massed our close fires and our all the things you're supposed to do, our close air support and our attack helicopters, and just obliterated them. So those were the 3 top moments.
That's good.
I must say.
That's good. Yeah, that's good.
You make it sound fun.
I would have to say it was. I mean, there were really tough times, especially when I was division commander. I had troops deployed overseas. Then we started taking casualties, and we lost a lot.
Yeah.
Probably 30 out of the 28th Division when I was division commander, 5 more when I was the adjutant general. And so you get to go to all those military funerals as a senior guy there. You're the one who presents the flag to the family members that left behind. I would go to those families prior to that to see to try and reassure them. And that's very stressful and very difficult to do.
I can remember too, Dad, before we move on, John, before your question, I can remember being at PSU, Pennsylvania State University. Remember Dad a few years ago, and it was for Temple playing Penn State, I think. And Mom and you went and saw all the Gold Star families. And this was right around Veterans Day, John, just so you know.
Beautiful.
And I mean, just to see that image of my father and my mom just consoling and talking with the Gold Stars, I mean, it's just amazing. You know, it's like the Gold Star family doesn't really get talked about a whole heck of a lot. But it is, you know, these people have lost loved ones that have served our country, and you want to support people. That's, if you find a Gold Star family, you support them as much as you possibly can.
And
that's a good point, because that also became, that'd probably be my 4th point that would be highlight. I have maintained contact with some of these Gold Star families that I was part of the funeral of their loved one, who still, we have a ceremony every year for all the war dead of the 28th Division in South side of State College, a place called Bollesburg. And there are a number of Gold Star families been there every time since their family member was killed. And so I look for them, they look for me. And because I told them, I said, the good thing is, you're part of us now. You're part of the extended 28th Division family. We will be around as long as you want us. We'll try to help you through this, but you're part of a much bigger family now. And I think for some people, Matt, I think that's helped them. I really do.
Oh, I think so too. I have no doubt. Yep.
Absolutely. Wow. It's crazy. So we want to move on to this question. For new recruits, people that are thinking about it, younger kids that are thinking that they want to have a life of service, they want to go into the military. What's your advice? If you could give them some really good advice to put them on that right track, what is that advice?
Well, I would say seriously consider it. For me, it was a very positive experience. And I'll tell them what you'll learn. You're going to learn teamwork. You're going to learn selfless service. You learn how that you're not just the whole thing in the universe. There's a bigger universe out there, and your military service can help that. You're going to learn how to be a leader for sure. You're going to learn how to work under pressure. So I would tell them all those things you're going to learn. I'd also tell them you're going to get to meet all kinds of people. And these days, pretty much all over the world, because almost everybody in the military deploys somewhere sooner or later. I certainly had my share. And that is an enriching experience. You're going to meet people in your unit that are hillbillies, that are tough kids from the streets of Philadelphia, guys from the main line who have a lot of money. Who knows, maybe somebody from Dallas, Texas at one point or another. Reject Cowboy fan, who knows? You'll meet all kinds of people, and that's a fun thing to do as well. And you're going to work hard. You're going to be physically demanding. It's going to be physically demanding. There'll be times when you're cold and wet and don't feel so hot. There's also going to be a lot of times when it's fun. It's just plain fun. I mean, when I was a senior captain, just about ready to leave the job as squadron motor officer, which I had for a number of years, we had a recovery section. They had a couple of really big tank retrievers, which I had a lot of fun playing with. Very demanding when you go out and to pull a tank out of a ditch, or that's been overturned, or that's stuck somewhere. It's a lot of heavy cables and winches involved, and pulleys and all that stuff. So I was out with this tank crew. It was at Fort Indian Town Gap, and was early March, but there was a lot of snow in the ground because it had been heavy snowing. So we were rigging and so forth, and I stepped back, and I didn't realize I stepped on the snowbank, but the snowbank was soft, and I went down about 4 feet. So all of a sudden I'm up to here in snow. Well, my crew, they just fell over laughing. I thought that was the funniest thing. They laughed about that for 6 months. Oh, I remember when the captain fell in the snow, ha, 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 you know, and all that stuff. So you had to laugh along with them. And so that'd be with those silly things like that. Or you fall in a mud puddle, or, you know, or you do something silly, or there's a lot of laughter and fun. And I will tell you, you will have fun in the military. You'll work hard, but you're sharing the same experience with a group of guys and or gals. And it can be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And you should approach this where you can have fun. Once you get through the basic training with people yelling at you, it's a lot more fun.
Absolutely.
Especially when you're in a unit. That's when you have fun.
So, Dad, for John and me, and I guess the rest of our audience, really, the civilians, how can we help veterans, those that are serving right now? What would you suggest for us to help financially, emotionally, things along those lines for those that are currently serving and have or who have served our country?
Yeah, Matt, a good question, but I would recommend working with or supporting the USO here. Philadelphia known as Liberty USO. It's a national, actually really an international organization. So, John, you can support that where you live as well. There's local ones there. They all have centers they use for traveling troops. They have a lot of other support things as well. So the local USO would be a great place to start. There are other organizations. Wounded Warrior Project is an outstanding one. They had some trouble a couple of years ago when they had some hot dogs run the organization, but they're all gone. They're run by a retired 3-star. They do some really good long-term work for wounded veterans. In Pennsylvania, we have another organization called the Pennsylvania Wounded Warriors. And that's run by a wife of a former Adjutant General. And they do great work as well. You can look up any of those on the website, Wounded Warrior Project, PA Wounded Warriors, or the USO, or in Philadelphia, the Liberty USO. So those would be 3 that I would start with. There's others out there, I'm sure, but I've had personal experience with all those 3 and know they're good organizations.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
You can also volunteer go to a VA hospital. They're always looking for volunteers, and they can use you for all kinds of work at the VA hospital as well.
Very cool.
That's great. Well, Dad, I can't thank you enough for the time spent. And John, I mean, you know, it's just awesome to be able to interview.
Everything I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, exactly. A major general. And you know, Dad, I can't thank you enough for your time. And yeah, it's such a great pleasure to spend this time with you. And we hope that those that are listening to this, that you're encouraged as well by this, that there are some really, really outstanding people that are serving our country each and every single day. Even in the midst of this pandemic, we've had the National Guard's been called out to quell riots in states that, you know, that have responsible governors and things along those lines.
And it's amazing that our governor was one of the first, but many other governors have copied this. When they have nursing homes that are short-staffed because of people get sick, they've sent squads or platoons of guardsmen in there, and they say, okay, you guys pick up, you got to clean the place because we don't have enough janitors anymore. They're out. So they clean the place, they help in the food preparation. Sometimes we're able to send medics in, and they're able to do some routine medical care, or they're out on the testing sites and do the swabbing. So you know, they've done all that kind of thing, as well as early on when they were setting up field hospitals, as you know, like they were done all over the country. They can do that as well. So
absolutely, yeah.
So amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. It's wonderful. So, Dad, thanks again for your time. And
welcome.
Yeah, John, again, yeah. Where can people find us on Two Noobs Talking?
Oh God, everywhere, Matt. Apparently. So just real quick on our socials, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And then once you want to get into our vids, we're on YouTube, BitChute, Rumble. I love saying that, by the way. Rumble, BitChute is like my favorite word. We're also on Apple Podcast and BeanPod and any other subscriber except for Spotify. And just for a caveat for this one, we're not on Spotify because I hate Spotify. The only thing you're on the show. You can find us on any cell phone app that brings you podcast. It's Two Noobs Talking, 215-512. That's how you find us. Audio, but definitely YouTube, BitChute, Rumble. That's where you can find us video.
For mostly video.
Good.
Yeah. And then, of course,
All
too, also one other thing before we go, our show notes. It's TwoNoobsTalking.wordpress.com, and we'll link all of the information we have to support primarily our military. So again, my thanks to Dad, Major General Wes Craig, U.S. Army retired. Thanks again, Dad, for all your time
You're welcome.
with us.
Good to talk to you guys.
Good to talk with you.
Right. I'll see you.
All right. Talk to you later.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.